Okay, we're now in episode 17, and we're still focusing on I'm going to shake the heavens and the earth. There is a technique in Bible writing that bookends. You know, you have this bookend here repeated by this bookend here, which means that what's going to follow this phrase is an elaboration on this phrase. So you are meant to tie them together. And as we saw, this phrase had its almost immediate fulfillment in the decree reply of Darius the Great. That's how Bible prophecy is structured. You always get a down payment because the same idea is meant to be a far fulfillment that always has a millennial connection. Okay, in other words, the regathering of Israel, the arrival of Messiah. The arrival of Messiah is bound up with the concept of millennium, because that's what Messiah is to begin. That's his time. When he arrives, that's when Israel's time was supposed to flower. And we're going to find out about that when we go to Psalm 90, which is going to take us a while. So here he's setting that up. Near fulfillment, okay? And then here, on the day that, they get, I'm sure it's that day, or they had just gotten it the day before or something, and God waited until the anniversary. They had gotten the reply at this point that everything was going to be okay. So God is now reminding Zerubbabel, okay, see, I did what I told you I was going to do up here. That's the near fulfillment. And now he's giving the far fulfillment. You're going to be the seed of Messiah. Because there's no point in doing this if there's no Savior. I mean, the whole reason that the temple has to be there is it has to be there for the Savior. And we're going to see just how important. If that temple wasn't rebuilt, all history should have ended. And that's why we're going to have to take this detour in many other Bible passages, so I can at least give you the highlights of what that means. That's shaking the heavens. That's all interpretive of shaking the heavens. And Messiah's arrival shakes the heavens, right? The defeat of Satan. Shaking the heavens means just that. All the heavens are going to be shaken up by this. When Messiah arrives and does his job, that defeats Satan. So it's not simply the heavens in the sky, with good weather. It's the heavens of the whole history of the conflict that went on before we even existed. So that's why we're going to have to take that detour. So you're to read this whole paragraph here as one unit. Okay? And it's really important to do that because elements that are in this section, in this unit, actually it goes all the way because the internal parallels go all the way to here. Actually, no, from here to here. This basically covers the time period, if you pay close attention, from the time Israel became a nation until the time Messiah is born. And the deft references that both Mary and Zacharias in Luke 1 end up, the way they do it, it's a very sophisticated technique you see Paul use, is they take keywords and they slightly change the keywords so that they can reference a whole slew of Bible verses in just a few words that they use, and therefore demonstrate just how deft their understanding of Scripture is. It really blows me away. The Magnificat in Luke 1 is the largest swatch of text you have about Mary in the Bible. So, I mean, these are her lines. She's got like maybe 10 or 15 lines. And that's her soliloquy in the Bible. You don't, everything else you learn about her, you really don't hear her say much. Just a one line here or one sentence there. You know, it's mostly, you see Mary through the eyes of other people. So here we're going to get a chance to see her speaking from her own lips, her own thought pattern. And both she and, of course, Zechariah, you'd expect it, but you don't expect it of her. She was adept at doctrine. She really was. It just blows me away. And you're going to hear me yell at the Catholic Church an awful lot when I get to that section, because they insult her so much that somebody should just give those people the death penalty for praising her for being a virgin. They're denuding her of her real value as a woman and as a human being. And you're going to see that. But they're also doing the same thing to Zechariah. Okay? When you got words like this repeated in the Bible and other verses, for us it's very hard to read it because it all looks the same until you understand what the people are doing when they craft their words that way. Because they didn't have computers that they could do word searches on like I do. They just knew this stuff in their head. And when you see how they, subsume this paragraph in what they do, you're going to be blown away. But I first have to explain what this is so you'll catch it when they word it. Shake the heavens is the key phrase here. Okay? So you're aware of that. You understand that this is bookmarked. These are two bookends right here. Okay? And this is a bookend with this. Okay? See, when they come out of Egypt, that's with Moses. All right? On that day, see, Messiah in seed form, as part of Israel, comes out of Egypt. The whole plague of the firstborn is designed to predict him. Okay, that's what Passover represents, the slaying of the firstborn, because he's going to be the firstborn. You have to understand what Passover really means. It's a celebration of the firstborn being slain for the sins of the world. And it was depicted in the near fulfillment by the firstborn of those who didn't believe dying. Because if you did believe, you made the little signs on the lintel of your doorpost. You could be Egyptian, you could be Jewish, you could be anything. Did you believe the angel of death was going to come that night, since everything else Moses said turned true? If you believed it, you put the blood on the lintel, the lintel, the doorpost, okay, on the top and on the sides. It's the shape of a cross. You did that, and then your firstborn didn't die. You didn't believe, you didn't do that, and your firstborn died. Okay? And that depicted Christ. So he's bookending here and here. And then he's got sub-bookends on the internal. We got shake the heavens, which I still have to explain because there's so much to say about it. He had done the same thing up here when he said, consider your ways, consider your ways. In other words, this marked off this section. Okay? And then everything else around it was an elaboration. But your primary attention was on this section. Now, what I'm going to show you in future videos is that God not only does this with word repeats, but he does it with meter. And unfortunately, the scholars don't know anything about this. So I'm going to have to spend considerable amount of time trying to do a short version of what I've already done in 5 playlists and over 100 videos, just so that you can get the idea. And then if you want to pursue the idea of the meter in more detail, you can go into the playlists themselves. But I can't even get to Mary until I show you the meter, because that elaborates on what shaking the heavens means. I mean, I hope you understand time means the world revolves. We measure time by the world revolving. The world is, in the heavens. I mean, there are 3 heavens. One of them is the known universe. Okay, so shaking the heavens has to do with changing the time, affecting time. And this temple, time should have ended if it wasn't up. That's why this is so important. This time should have ended when the temple went down. Satan was trying to get that to happen. And we're going to see next in Daniel 11 that it didn't work out because there was one guy, just one guy, who had enough faith to ask God to rebuild it. None of these people had asked God to rebuild it. Daniel did. He went at the right time, and we're going to find out why he knew it was the right time. He went, he prayed, that's why they're there. And now that they started working, because of what? Because they're believing God, or they wouldn't be working. And so what is God going to do? God's going to give them good weather when they didn't have it before. Because why? Because they stopped working. Because why? Because they lost faith. Meanwhile, there's some guy who's being persecuted his whole life, sitting in Babylon, and he doesn't even have an opportunity to really, follow the law very much. I mean, he's doing as much as he can, but he has to live on vegetables. Okay? He can't have holy meat because nothing around him is kosher. And he prays. One guy prays, and all of history is saved. Okay. We gotta orient to the time here. Belshazzar was the nephew of Nebuchadnezzar, who was the last Babylonian king. Daniel was reinstated because he interpreted the handwriting on the wall for the very frightened Belshazzar, who was desecrating temple goblets with a drunken orgy. And when the handwriting appeared on the wall, Belshazzar's mother, who apparently was a believer, told him that Daniel could interpret it. So he sent for Daniel. He had already made the offer that anybody who could interpret it would be the third ruler in the realm. And Daniel came, and he didn't want the honor, but Belshazzar gave it to him anyway. And that same night, this is the night that Gobi-Ras comes in, and Cyrus conquers Babylon as a result. Belshazzar was slain, and Darius the Mede, who was the uncle of Cyrus, ends up receiving the kingdom. Darius the Mede should have inherited Persia, but it's a long story. Cyrus was a kind of, how do you want to call it? If ever there was a guy who had a fight with his father and you wanted to say was somebody who would really hurt his father because he just plain wanted to, even if he was right, and you can argue he was right and you can argue he was wrong on both sides. Cyrus was that kind of guy. But he also knew how to command loyalty. There was something about him, must have been very charismatic. So his own uncle is actually on his side. Very loyal. Okay. So notice that Belshazzar is slain, which means that since Daniel's the third ruler in the kingdom, Daniel doesn't have to be slain. The king is slain. I have to presume that the second guy was slain. And that left Daniel, who was just newly appointed. Okay, and the circumstances could have been related pretty easily. So Daniel 6 is the story of the lion's den, which is the first year that Darius is in office. Okay, and that's when they began accusing Daniel because he's back in power again after about 30 years of being out of power. Okay, and they trick him into a sort of arrogant thing that you can't do anything without the king's approval for 30 days. It's the idea of the king playing God. Okay, you can read this whole story yourself in Daniel 6 if you want. Anyway, they become close friends as a result, and Darius, basically did the same thing that we'll later see Darius, the other Darius, do. Okay, look. Okay? So then we have a parenthesis as far as the timeline goes. This is in the first year of the nephew who got taken over. And this is in his third year, the implication being that this is the beginning and the ending of his time. So Daniel was given time to warn him, and he didn't listen. And that was all the prediction. Daniel 7 and 8 is the prediction of the Persians and later the Greeks. So that by the time the Persians take over, Daniel can warn them about their future. Okay, and he didn't. When you get real information from God, you don't crow about it. He was sick. Okay. It's overwhelming, as my pastor put it. It's humiliating. When you really know you know something from God, you're humiliated. The last thing you want to do is crow about it. But at the same time, you can't be quiet about it either. It's an obligation. But you never feel like you're good or holy or anything like that. That, people who feel special because they understand something or they know scripture or they get a revelation. Honey, if you really got one from God, you wouldn't feel holy or good. You wouldn't. So here we are, first year of Darius. Okay. He's going to be in power for only 3 years, as we're going to see in a few minutes. This is the famous Daniel 9. And we're going to be coming back to this in more detail. But I want to tell you a couple of things about it that are important right now. This whole section through verse 24 is in metered Hebrew. Daniel is mapping the words to a meter of time that got established as a rhetorical style by Moses. I don't know. Moses wrote the first 5 books of the Bible. A lot of people think Job is actually older than Moses writing. And if so, then I would like to be able to find meter of that same kind in Job to say who was first. But right now, as far as I know, Moses was first. It is an extensively documentable, provable style of meter that accounts time sabbatically. Now, here's the way it works, the root idea. Okay, this is God replying to Daniel. Okay? Let's hold the reply. Okay. God meters his reply to Daniel based on Daniel's meter. And both of these I covered, it was one of my longer videos on Daniel 9. It's 1 hour and 24 minutes. You can go watch it yourself and see the meter play live yourself. I show the Hebrew on screen. I show you how the meter works. I show the meter counts, the whole bit. I've done extensive videos on this topic. There are 4 basic passages I've done videos on. Daniel 9, Psalm 90, which started this style, followed by Isaiah 53, who's the next guy to pick it up as far as I can tell. Daniel 9 is third, and Paul using Greek words, but Hebrew meter, is doing it in Ephesians 1, 3 through 14. And I've got 5 playlists on this topic. I'm not going to go through all that material here. You're going to have to do that yourself. But the basic thing he's doing is he's taking his prayer, starting here. Well, let's see. Starting here in verse 4. His words are mapped to Israel's history, so that each verse is a kind of testimony about that time in history. That's exactly the style that Isaiah uses in Isaiah 53 and that Moses uses in Psalm 90. See, everything with the Bible is like, you have to think like a thesaurus. On the one hand, if you just read it as straight text without the meter, you get a layer of meaning, and it'll be a valid layer of meaning. Okay? But when you factor in the meter, then the meter ends up showing a, what do you want to call it? A historical layer of meaning with the same words used. Okay? So for example, in Isaiah 53, like here, this is really what Daniel's saying. He's repeating himself. Okay, this is, pretty standard wording as far as we're concerned. This is almost repetitive in the Psalms. Okay, but when you realize that this verse, okay, is about Daniel's own captivity historically, he's using this verse to tell you the date of his prayer. He's also telling you that it's timed. His prayer is on purpose. He's supposed to pray now. See, I prayed to the Lord and confessed. If you knew that he was using this wording in Hebrew as a dateline, this would make a lot more, this would have a dimension of understanding that you wouldn't have if all you did was blindly read the words. Okay? The next thing about it is that he's keying the words he uses to past benchmarks. He's not only datelining in light of the day he prays, he's literally connecting his words to past important benchmarks in Israel's history, specifically from Psalm 90 and from Isaiah 53, but mostly Psalm 90. And then the rest of this text, like this, is based on King David. This is based on Solomon and some of his progeny. And then he's just ticking off, ticking down a list, the laundry list of the kings until he gets here. And he's come full circle on his own captivity at that point. See, he starts with his own captivity. This is classical Greek drama, okay? Except that it obviously predates Greek drama. He's coming full circle in time from there, where he's captive, by this point. And it's all metered all the way through. It's even metered. Yeah, it's metered all the way through verse 19. And there's an accounting in the meter that accounts for the time. And not only that, but all this accounting, all this meter plays on the meter of both Psalm 90 and Isaiah 53 at the same time. There's just no way that he could not be speaking filled with the Spirit. This is divine. I've never seen anything like this. The math just blows me away every time I think about it. Because he's talking off the top of his head. He's not rehearsing. He's doing all this in one take. He's not writing it down. He's talking. This is how good he was. If you want to know how it was that Babylon could be well ruled by this one guy, all you have to do is look at how he constructs this prayer in the meter. It's unbelievable. It's humanly impossible to be that good, as far as I'm concerned. I dare anybody else to come up with a meter that's this good. Now, Isaiah has the same style. The words on the surface are about the prophecy of Messiah and how we will regard him and how we will disregard him when he comes, how he pays and how he wins at the end. We all know that story on the surface. But Isaiah's meter is from first, well, I might as well just show Isaiah, okay? You can't see it in translation. That's why you know immediately the King James only people are wrong. They're just flat wrong. All this, actually it doesn't even begin. The chapter begins here, because they didn't have chapters and chapter markers and verse markers. Okay. It was just all running. That's the real Isaiah 53 in Hebrew. when he starts here, and it's badly translated, frankly, in any version, when he starts here, the number of syllables, including ellipsis, because he uses ellipsis just like Daniel does, that covers 1,078 syllables, and it's referencing the millennium from first David to last David. See, the number of years from first David's birth to last David's death was supposed to be 1077, and then in order to be divisible by 7, because the meter is a 7, it's always a 7 factor. In order for it to be divisible by 7, it's 1078, which is the beginning of the year 1078. See, David's born here, and beginning of year 1078 from David's birth, that was when Messiah was supposed to die. Okay? That was when it was supposed to happen. So you get an exact timeline. Every single syllable in here in the Hebrew stands for 1 year. And then there's an ellipsis between here and here, between that section and that section, of 252 years on purpose. This is David's death. David's age 77 when he dies. Luke and Matthew pick up on this. This is the part they pick up on. Matthew uses this to craft his genealogy. Luke uses all this to craft his genealogy. 42 syllables in Hebrew here. 77 syllables in Hebrew here. So Matthew's 3:14s are derived from the number of syllables. Luke's 77 sons are derived from these syllables. This verse is about the Gentiles. This verse is about the Jews and how they are, affected by him and how they despise him. Okay? And then here this is when Hezekiah is ruling. When Isaiah goes to Hezekiah. There's a 252-year ellipsis here. And I cover this in detail in my Isaiah 53 videos. There is another ellipsis, and this is going to be important. There is another ellipsis right, is it there? Oh, no, I think it's here. Yeah, there's another ellipsis between verses 11 and 12 of 364 years, which stands for the time the temple was standing. So this verse here, or maybe it's in another place. No, I think it's between 10 and 11. Okay, this verse begins in 5 BC. Now I gotta fine-tune the BC AD adjustment, because when I convert to AD BC, I'm using our system, and our system is screwed up. But it's still the right number of years. It's just whether I call it 5 BC or 1 BC or 2 BC or 3 BC. I gotta work that out. Mary knows this meter. She's using it. Okay? This is the time when Mary gets from Mary's pregnancy to the time Christ was supposed to die, but he dies 7 years prior due to Jewish rejection. Okay? When he was supposed to die in what we have to call 37 AD till I can fine tune it. And Paul I have to figure out Paul's meter better, and that will tell me whether, how to fix our BC AD. Okay, but she knows this timeline. She's using Isaiah just like Daniel does. All right? So at each point in Isaiah, from the time of the birth of David to the death of the last David, that's what that blue covers, you could count your syllables and know what would be the character of the time you lived in. For example, the first temple goes down at the end of verse 4. Smitten of God and afflicted in particular. When you get to that, and it's stronger than afflicted, but we'll just leave it go. Okay? By the time you get to the end of that verse, that is 586 BC. Then it's in patterns, as you'll see in the Isaiah playlist. It's in patterns of 56, 70, 42, and 35. Deliberate alternating patterns, the meter. And then each verse, see, that if you counted all the syllables in Hebrew from here to here, and you took into account the fact that there's a deliberate 252-year ellipsis here, okay, which I explain in the videos, then you're getting an annual, this is exactly 586, and that's the characteristic of it. Okay? And then it goes on. Okay? So in this part, this is why I have to get to, Daniel was tracking this to time when he was going to pray. All right? Unfortunately, the meter in the Hebrew and the meter in the English are they realize it's meter. They're trying to translate it poetically, but it's so far different that it doesn't make a whole lot of sense what I'm saying. Okay, I did do in the videos, in the Isaiah 53 playlist, I retranslated Isaiah 53 metrically in English so that you could get the same cadence and the same number of syllables and you could do your count. So I suggest that you look at the Isaiah 53 playlist. I believe it's the last video or near the last video in the list. And it'll have an English translation that you can download, so you can see it metrically translated and therefore copy the meter and see the count. Okay, when it says by his scourging we are healed, actually the part about, well, okay, let's see, they translate it in the wrong order. Okay, this part and this part, where do I want to put it? The word that they're saying fell is not really there. I mean, it's there, but it's not there the way they're translating it. Basically, it's yifki. Okay, at that syllable, Yehua yifki, boet. Okay, they're translating that chastening of our well-being. It really means that God threw our sins on him. This is sugared over language. Okay? God threw our sins on him. God threw. Okay? That's where Daniel had to pray. That was the 49th year of exile. And by the time it gets to healed, which is the last word in the Hebrew in the verse, that's when Cyrus dies. And then the next 7 syllables cover the civil war. And the next 7 syllables, and see, this is in actually 21. I think it's in groups of 3 syllables. I'd have to look it up. But this one is definitely 7. This is 7. I believe the third one is 7 too, but it might be 8. Okay, so we've got the civil war after Cyrus. We've got the, so that takes you to 522 when they rebuild. And then by the time they get done rebuilding, that's that clause. Okay? So now the temple's up. See how apt this is. So now the temple's up again. Alright? Civil war, everybody gone astray. Okay? Rebuilding, everybody going in his own way. Because that's what they had been. Alright? But the Lord has caused the iniquity. By the time it's up again, this is actually a living reality because the temple depicts Christ. Alright? All the animals are being sacrificed in the right place. There's a real temple where they're being sacrificed. So the iniquity is falling on him because he's built. You see? The cleverness of that. And it just goes on. I mean, I don't want to spend too much time on this because I got to get to other passages. But this whole thing is a calendar of history from first David's birth to last David's then scheduled death. Okay? Now Christ died 7 years earlier than scheduled. But there was a schedule. And that's what this calendar depicted. And it was easy and better to do it this way. You didn't have to tell anybody. First of all, because each verse that's covering the time period it covers is a little testimony about that period. And you had to memorize everything by syllables anyway. So your syllable count did double duty. It was very prosaic. It did double duty. Oh, hi, this is going to be the characteristic of, the last, just before he dies. Yeah, well, duh. He interceded for the transgressors. He's on the cross. Okay? Moses did the same thing in Psalm 90 about history from Adam forward. Isaiah is taking it, Moses did it Adam to the time period we're going to be looking at, because I got to go to that next. Isaiah is taking it from first David to last David. And then Daniel, whoops, let me get to Daniel. Daniel is actually is capitalizing on what Isaiah did. Where's Daniel? It's never in the right order, of course. Daniel capitalizes on what Isaiah did and does a retrospective with his meter. See, this one starts with David and the kings forward of David, and then I think he gets full circle. Yeah, he comes full circle there. All right, and then he comes a different kind of full circle because he's tying to two different circles of time. He comes one full circle there, measuring by his own captivity and when he prays. And then he comes to a second dateline circle here. And then from here to 19, and I've covered all this in the videos, and I've done extensive Word documents showing you all this in the Hebrew. He goes forward in time to the millennium just like Moses had done in Psalm 90. So he's capitalizing on what Isaiah had done and basically, repeating it. Okay, yeah, this king, this king, this king, those were all the kings that Isaiah covered. And see, this is the testimony of each one. And each one of these verses is covering multiple kings, generally speaking, until he gets to the kings of his own captivity, which ends there, because he's coming full circle from where he was, going back to David, then coming forward again to the time of his own captivity. He doesn't even cover the kings after 607. That's how bad they were. Okay, and then that's the end of his indictment. And this is his summing up. He's very good as a lawyer, really very good as a lawyer. Okay, but his meter is going forward in time, and it's this section of the meter that God answers in these verses. And like I said, I've done extensive videos on Daniel, and there are a lot of them, and they start in episode 19 of the Psalm 90 playlist. And then the ones that are done by Paul are in the 11 GGS playlist, and those are too many to even begin to talk about Paul. The point I want you to understand is that this thing with Daniel, okay, getting the answer here in the future, but praying in the first year of Darius the Mede, meaning the first year of Cyrus. He's only going to be around for about 4, maybe 5 years at this point. His last 4 or 5 years of his life. And as we saw in Daniel 6, his last years weren't too happy. This happened sometime in the last year or two. Could have happened in the first year, but in the last year or two, probably. And the reason I say that is because of Daniel 10. This is the last year that Daniel is going to be employed. Okay, we're back. And now we're really going to get into what's shaking up the heavens. Again, because I know this has been really complicated, and I apologize. Israel knows what time it is if they read their Bible. For them, reading the Bible was not the way we do. They had to memorize it, and they did memorize it, and they still do memorize it. They categorize, they index by keywords and syllable counts. That's how a lot of people did it in the ancient world. The Bible, the Jews weren't exclusive to doing that. It's a very handy system. I find myself using it all the time. I don't know, it just comes natural. I don't know, Anything that I happen to remember in Hebrew, I'm suddenly always counting with my fingers, because I'll know if a syllable's missing, and I don't even have to think about it. And as far as I know, I'm not Hebrew by blood, so so there's no race memory there as far as I know. Okay, so in the 3rd year of Cyrus, the king of Persia, that's telling you a lot of things. It's no longer mentioning Darius, so he's dead. He dies in the 3rd year. Okay? Because now it's mentioning Cyrus and not Darius, so he's not there. The other hint is right here. Daniel's been mourning for 3 weeks. Now, he's not just mourning for the death of Darius, who was his friend by this point. We saw that at the end of Daniel 6. The temple's in trouble. Remember? This is the 3rd year of Cyrus. It was the 1st year that the decree was issued to go back. Okay, the 1st year of Cyrus would have probably been measured if they came in bull of 539, like the scholars think. Then in 538, that's when the decree was issued, because that would have been his first accession year. He would have celebrated his accession in Nisan, beginning of the year. So the trouble is, of course, we measure from January to December, so whether we call it 539 still or 538 by their calendar is kind of a dicey thing. I've got to figure out how to adjust that. I just haven't had the time. So it was in Cyrus's 2nd year, okay, it was the 1st year he issued the decree. In his 2nd year, 537, they start building. So their 2nd year is his 2nd year. You got that? But they only finished building the foundation. So this is now the 3rd year of Cyrus. So it's their 3rd year also. And they're not building anything. They got stopped after they finished the foundation, remember? Okay, that was Ezra 3 and 4. So Daniel has lost, we know because Cyrus is mentioned here instead of Darius, that Daniel had been mourning the death of his friend. But it's not just the death of his friend, and he doesn't have to mention what kind of mourning it is, because this is going out contemporaneously. They're getting a copy of Daniel. Okay, they know what Daniel said in Daniel 9. They confessed that to Tattenai. So they got it, there was a postal service going back and forth, remember? Okay, so they knew what Daniel was writing. My guess is that he wrote this in as chapters. He'd write a chapter and send it out, write a chapter and send it out, and they collated it afterwards. Okay, so he didn't need anything. He was in mourning. Yeah, and it's not just for his friend. All right? He's been mourning for 3 entire weeks. He's been mourning longer than normal. And he's mourning more deeply than normal. This is the kind of mourning you do for the temple. Okay? And you can understand why. And so now, see, it's the 3rd year, it's the beginning of the 3rd year. And on the 24th day of the 1st month, and we know that that's Nisan. So it's 24 days into the 3rd year of Cyrus. And you can understand why. See, it's the 24th of the 1st month. See, on the 24th of Kislev, the foundation was laid. We saw that in Haggai too, several times. So now, okay, Kislev to Tebet is 1 month. Tebet to Shabbat is 2 months. Okay, Shabbat to Adar is 3 months, and it's 3 weeks. And this is really important. You know that the 1st month of the year, okay, the 1st month, that's the time of what? Passover. It's the 24th. He hasn't eaten. He didn't celebrate Passover. Why? Because there's no temple. This is like an aposiopesis. That's a phrase for something in Greek where you choke up and you can't even say the words. He's not talking about what he's mourning. And he wouldn't have to, not to his contemporary audience. All right? He didn't celebrate Passover, the most important holiday to celebrate. He didn't celebrate it. Now, he's not going to forego Passover just because his friend died. You get that. Okay? So here he is on the 24th day of the month, hadn't eaten anything. This is what you do when you're mourning the temple. And he missed Passover. No Passover. He didn't celebrate it. He hadn't eaten anything in 3 weeks. See, he's not telling you that the 24th day of the month. See, he's saying he didn't eat for 3 weeks, and he's saying it's the 24th day of the first month. He doesn't tell you. This is real important. He doesn't tell you that he missed Passover. You'd have to know that Passover was scheduled in the first month, and he doesn't even mention it. This is very typical Bible style, and it's going to be really important in reviewing Mary's comments. They don't mention the obvious. We moderns are expecting them to mention the obvious, and if we don't see it mentioned the way we think it should be mentioned, we say the Bible isn't saying that. But the Bible is saying that if you know the background. 3 weeks, 24th day of the first month, that means he did not celebrate Passover. He's not saying those words. But that's definitely what it is. If you didn't eat, and that was the month of Passover, then you didn't eat Passover. You didn't do any of the things that you're supposed to do for Passover. He didn't eat any food. He didn't use ointment. Okay, that means that he didn't clean up. This is what you do when you're in temple mourning. Okay? You're supposed to clean your house for Passover. You're supposed to clean out all the leaven in the house. And they even make a little ceremony out of it now in modern Judaism. He didn't do that. He didn't drink wine fermented or non-fermented. Fermented before Passover, fermented after Passover, but not during. He didn't even drink any wine. You're supposed to drink wine on Passover, non-fermented. It was the one time a year that you drank non-fermented wine, grape juice. It was to symbolize the fact that Christ had no sin. He didn't eat any meat. You're supposed to eat lamb on Passover. You see? So this has to be because of the problems with the temple. He's praying to get rid of those problems. And here's where we get into our shaking the heavens in the top window, top blue, short blue highlight. It's not really certain man, but I'm gonna try to leave off the mistranslation. Okay, the point is that Gabriel comes to him again. Okay, there are men with him. He's not alone. Okay? He falls, understandably, trembling, blah, blah. Okay, I'm leaving that, because that's not the point I want to get to. And you're familiar with this chapter, I hope. Okay, now watch this. Don't be afraid, standard, because angels are so beautiful, they're fearful to look at. The first day, that was when? 3 weeks. So, he started then on the 3rd day of the month, knowing full well he was going to skip Passover. And the angel says, from the first day that you set your heart on what? Understanding. What was he trying to understand? There's nothing to understand about the death of his friend. But there's a whole lot to understand about a prayer that was answered by God and then suddenly it's being forestalled. You with me on that? From the first day, your words were heard. But he doesn't come until the 24th. Why? That's what the angel answers next. Always look at the flow of a passage or you don't know what it's saying. The prince of the kingdom of Persia was withstanding me. Now, you know that an angel is stronger than a human, so this prince is not a human being. Now, my pastor spent a lot of time explaining why it's an angel, and angels have titles too, and they're called princes when they're the angels that are in charge of running the politics of a country that they're trying to manipulate. Only one angel can withstand another angel for 21 days. See, the whole time that he's fasting, Gabriel wants to come to him but can't because he has to do this. He has another job that takes precedence. Now see, look, this is shaking the heavens. This is angel against angel. The angel of Persia was able to withstand Gabriel for 21 days. That means there's a fight going on in heaven over what Darius would later win and do. But Darius is down the road in 522. This is 537, 536. Okay? Gabriel alone is facing some other angel as powerful as him alone during the time that Daniel was fasting and praying. This has to be about the temple. This has nothing to do with the fact that his best friend is dead, although his best friend probably died as part of the test. What do you mean test? Well, there is a war going on in heaven because there's a timeline on earth about when Messiah comes, and if that temple isn't up, and for it to be up, it has to have a protector, and Persia's the assigned protector, Isaiah 45. Isaiah began predicting the Persian takeover, first Babylon and then Persia, starting in Isaiah chapter 40, which Daniel knows. That's why Daniel prayed in Daniel 9. Between Isaiah and Jeremiah, Daniel knows what the story is. And then, of course, the angel's been visiting him ever since Daniel 2, explaining the future history. And by this point, we know when Persia comes. We know about Greece already, and we're getting ready to know about Rome. So there is something going on in the heavens over the timeline here, enough that Gabriel has to fight this other angel for 21 days when he was supposed to go to Daniel. See, from the first day, I hate it when I do that. Of course, I'm being dramatic now. From the first day, I was supposed to come, but I was withstood. Now, you got to think about this, especially because the translation here ends up being pretty blasphemous. If he was supposed to go on the first day, why is he detailed? There's billions of angels, okay? Myriads, tens and tens of thousands, innumerable. Why is Gabriel the guy who has to go? If he's supposed to go see Daniel, which he has already done twice or three times or more, then why is Gabriel the guy that's got to go fight the Prince of Persia? Okay? In order for Gabriel to leave to talk to Daniel, Michael had to go. See? Michael, one of the chief princes, see, prince, titled for an angel, came to help me. For I had been left there. See, this is the part that's blasphemous. For I had been left there. The implication is that God and the angels abandoned Gabriel. Baloney. It was a sort of handicapping. The fight, there was some kind of terms in the fight here that only Gabriel and only Michael were allowed to handle it. it's not that he was left there. He was alone, detailed to go do this. And then Michael was finally allowed to relieve him. So Michael's there now so that Gabriel can come to Daniel. All right? This is shaking the heavens. For 21 days at least. Because Daniel's prayer shook the heavens already and started the rebuilding of the temple. So now Daniel is concerned about why it stopped. And the angel's explaining to him that the heavens are shaking. Now he's not using the word shake. He doesn't have to. You see this? If he's withstanding him for 21 days, that means the outcome of who has the right to manipulate Persian behavior toward Israel is at stake. And finally, God allowed Michael to come and relieve Gabriel. In other words, it was a stacked deck. I don't know what the terms are. I'm sure that they're in here somewhere, but I haven't found them yet. But what you know is that there were some terms that were between the two sides where it had to be one angel against one angel. And Gabriel got picked. And not until whatever happened at the end of the 21 days. Maybe Daniel's fasting. I don't have all the details yet on this. But after the 21 days, he got relieved. Okay? But not before. All right, so now that he's relieved, he's come to give him understanding of the future. Because that's why he's mourning. He's mourning because it's the 3rd year of Cyrus, not his friend. So the protection for the temple is reduced. And since Cyrus is off fighting, even though he's now king of Persia, he's king of Persia, but it's not saying Darius, so Darius is gone. So that means Cambyses is back in Persia, which of course we know from history. And that's where all that infighting is going on. Cyrus is gone. So Cambyses is having trouble with his own factions. Yeah. And what's really going on is this. Shaking up the heavens. So the work on the temple stopped. So now the angel comes after having, won whatever it was he needed. And it could have simply been that Daniel stayed in mourning, doing the thing that you would expect should have been breaking the law. For 3 weeks, in the first month when he should be observing Passover, he skips it on purpose. I'm sure that after 60 years of being in captivity, he figured out how to observe Passover every year. He went in his teens. Since 607, and this is now 536, so he's been there for, all of his life. All right? So it could be that the battle that was only allowed to be between the two angels was based on Daniel's prayer because the people in the land weren't praying. And people in the land, like it said, they were afraid and they felt, weepy and all that when they dug the foundation and everybody withstood them. So now there was some kind of deal about what angels could do to help mankind that restricted the game. Okay, kind of like the Greek practice of one soldier versus another soldier, so the two whole armies don't have to fight. The hoplite kind of thing. All right. So Gabriel didn't even say he won. He said he got relieved. He's got to go back, as we're going to see at the end of this. Okay. So now I've come to give you understanding of what will happen. All right? And that's when he turns to the rest of this. Okay? Now, all of this is very upsetting to him. Okay? As Gabriel talks, it's really upsetting to Daniel. because he now is getting the final chapter of the story. He already had a preview of coming attractions, but now he's going to get a blow-by-blow description about how the changeover to Rome and the machinations of the Seleucids and all that stuff, and how Rome will eventually take over them. But before we even get that far, because I'm presuming you know something about Daniel and the interpretation, I want to focus on this for a minute. I will tell you what is inscribed in the writing of truth. There is the divine recording of truth, obviously, in heaven, and we don't have all of it given to us, but we do have all we need to know given to us. So part of what's in heaven is given to us down here, because this thing is the angels fighting the angels too. All right, this whole deal is who wants God. This whole thing, it's not about works. It's not about whether you're good. If it really mattered how good you had to be, then God would make you perfect looking. He'd give you all kinds of money and all kinds of everything else you need to do the job right. But you never have what you need to do the job right, no matter what you have. Okay, so it's not about that. Do you want God anyway? Look, Daniel had prayed, the temple started being built, and then all of a sudden it goes wrong. Okay, and it's going wrong because these angels shaking the heavens are fighting. Same thing as in Revelation 12. There's a war in heaven, and they got the same issue we do. It's one thing we all have in common. Do you want God or not? And in spite of the fact that it looked like Daniel got a big slap in the face when the temple, suddenly the rebuilding stopped, he's still mourning anyway. He believes he's going to get an answer. He keeps on doing it. And he even misses Passover to do it. Okay? He's acknowledging the fact that observing things with your bodily customs aren't what make, that's not what makes for holy. Remember when God said, the holy meat on the inside touching the fold of the garment? So he's recognizing, well, yeah, it's holy meat that I'm missing, but you know what? What makes me holy is you, God. So I'm not going to eat anything because I want to, mourning was an important thing to do then, to represent your attitude. Okay? Not eating. It's not mandated in the law. It was something that people did by choice in order to express themselves toward God. And you could probably do that today too, but it's not mandated. It never has been. People who are all proud of themselves because they fast, just walk away from those people as fast as you can. That different kind of fast, when you see them talk about their fasting, fast yourself away from them because they're nuts. Okay? That wasn't the purpose of fasting. It was to save you time so you could study more, and that's exactly what he's doing here. So he regarded missing Passover as a good thing so he could study more, because it takes time to cook that food and eat it and observe it and all that other stuff. So he paid attention to studying instead, which we know because it says here, see, you set your heart on understanding this, the meaning of the stopping. You set your heart on understanding, not on your behaviors. I can't stress enough that works are not it. Works are not the spiritual life. Okay? Here's a lot of works going on. The prince of the kingdom of Persia, the demon, he's working really hard fighting against Gabriel. He's working. Yeah. For nothing. So now he comes to give an understanding. And there goes the future. Okay, now, like I said, the writing of truth that's being referenced there is in heaven. This, somebody should just shoot himself for translating it that way. Yet there is no one who stands firmly with me against these forces except Michael, your prince. Oh, God has abandoned me. All the angels have abandoned me. Isn't that sick? 2,000 years well, not 2,000 years. How old is the English language? About 600 AD, 500 AD. This has been translated over and over and over. And nobody wakes up and says, gee, this is blaspheming God. Yeah. Okay, hello? No one will stand firmly except Michael. That's not what he means. He's saying that the fighting deal is that it's just him and this guy, or Michael as relief. That's the deal, the terms that God set. Just like it was one guy, Daniel, whose prayer changed history. That's why we're here. And the same guy seems to be getting a no answer all of a sudden, and that's what he's seeking to understand. Even so, with the angels, they got terms too. This is a legal trial. This is a conflict. There are rules of engagement. And one person does make a difference. Now, granted, this is Gabriel and Michael, and those are the two chief seraphim. Okay, there was no such thing as a seraphim until Satan fell. That title, came into being because of Satan's fall. Higher title than Satan had. But the point is they got rules of engagement too. All right. So when you see up here, it says, "I am going to shake the heavens." Said here and repeated here. The first time he's shaking the heavens is to get the temple rebuilt, and we're beginning to see why that's important. And yet it sure was shaking the heavens. Those are the angels fighting over it. But the second time to shake the heavens is to produce Messiah. And that was referenced by the meter of Daniel and Isaiah, and I haven't shown it yet, but I'm going to, Psalm 90. There was a timeline. The Jews even know about it today. The first 2,000 years, it's really 2,100, but that's okay. They round it to 2,000. The first 2,000 years belonged to the Gentiles. The second 2,000 years belonged to the Jews. Messiah was supposed to come at the end of the second 2,000 years, and he did. We're looking at it. That's what Mary's Magnificat is actually about. And then the millennium was supposed to begin, and that's what Psalm 90 mapped, where we're going to go in the next video. And that is shaking heavens and earth, because that's Psalm 110:1. That's where the earth gets shaken up. That's the second advent. Lord said to my Lord, sit down till I make your enemies a footstool for your feet. And then, of course, you've got Hebrews 2, the conquering of Satan, which, of course, is referenced in a bazillion passages in the Old Testament. All right, specifically Ezekiel 28 and Isaiah 14, which just flew into my mind. All right, so the heavens are being shaken. And that's besides the fact that the weather is being shaken up, and the politics are being shaken up, and the economies are being shaken up in good and bad ways. Okay, so you see, it was a one-on-one deal. So don't interpret this the way it sounds in English. Nobody's around. I'm left alone. No, it's not. It's the rules are that nobody's supposed to stand, except for Michael. That's the deal, because this was so important that the temple be rebuilt, that they had some kind of special challenge that they had to undergo. That's stressing the importance of the temple.